No one in that crowded restaurant, with its golden glow reflected in crystal chandeliers and the elegant murmur of conversation, could have imagined that a simple act of kindness would turn into a public condemnation. Between tables covered with immaculate white linens and wine glasses chiming in soft toasts, the routine seemed to follow its natural course, predictable, safe, indifferent. But it's on the most ordinary days, when everything appears to be under control, that fate often prepares its cruelest twists. The Golden Plate was more than just a place to eat. It was a sanctuary of appearances, where every detail had to be perfect, every customer expected royal treatment, and any mistake was punished without mercy. The mirror-covered walls didn't just make the place look larger, they amplified the judgments within. Here, efficiency mattered more than humanity. And Emma Hartley knew those unspoken rules by heart. She crossed the main hall balancing plates with the precision of someone who had turned the task into an art form. Her movements were quick but graceful, her smiles measured but genuine. Emma wasn't just another waitress, she was the only one who truly cared. While other servers followed protocol, she saw people. And perhaps, that was exactly what would condemn her. If you like stories with unexpected twists and powerful lessons, make sure to hit that like button now. The glass door turned slowly, ushering in a figure that didn't belong to that glamorous scene. An elderly man, white hair tousled by the wind, a wrinkled suit, and shoes worn by time. Arthur Morgan held a battered hat in his trembling hands, his pale blue eyes blinking against the bright chandelier light. He looked lost, as if he had walked into the wrong place by mistake. The maitre d' hesitated but led him to a discreet table in the corner, far from the good tables, far from important eyes. Arthur sat with difficulty, his back curved under the weight of years, and picked up the menu with shaky hands. His eyes scanned the small print, frowning, moving the paper closer and farther in a futile attempt to read it. Emma watched from afar. While other waiters hurried past, pretending not to notice, something in her chest tightened. She recognized that look. It was the same her grandfather had before he passed, when his sight failed him and pride kept him from asking for help. Without thinking twice, she approached. "Good afternoon, sir. May I help you with the menu?" Her voice was soft, free of hurry or judgment. Arthur lifted his eyes, surprised. It had been a long time since anyone had spoken to him with genuine kindness. "Well, the print's a bit small," he admitted, embarrassed. "My eyesight isn't what it used to be." Emma pulled a chair and sat beside him. With infinite patience, she began to read the menu, describing each dish in detail. She didn't notice that the manager, Eric Malone, was watching from across the room, eyes narrowed, studying every second. 15 minutes passed. Eric approached with calculated steps, his professional smile perfectly in place. "Good afternoon, sir," he greeted Arthur with exaggerated reverence. "I hope you're being well taken care of. Emma, I need you in the kitchen. Now." His tone was polite, but the pressure in his gaze was unmistakable. Emma stood, excused herself, and followed him. In the narrow hallway leading to the kitchen, far from customers' eyes, Eric turned sharply. "You're here to serve, not to run a therapy session," he hissed, low but venomous. "We have 8 tables waiting. Move." Emma returned to the dining room, her heart pounding, but continued her work. Arthur placed his order, and she wrote it down quickly. When she served his dish, she noticed he was struggling to cut the meat. His hands trembled, the fork slipping. Without hesitation, Emma picked up the utensils and gently cut the meat into smaller pieces. "There you go, sir. This should be easier," she said with a warm smile. Arthur held her hand for a brief moment, his eyes glassy. "Thank you, dear. You remind me of my daughter." From behind the counter, Eric watched, his jaw tightening. He crossed the room again, this time with less patience. "Sir, is everything all right?" he asked Arthur with forced kindness. "Oh, yes. The young lady is wonderful," the old man replied, smiling. "That's great. Emma, may I have a word with you?" This time, he led her near the bar. His voice was low, but the tension made every word echo for those nearby. "This is a restaurant, not a retirement home," he growled. "You're here to work, not to adopt grandfathers. I was only helping, Mr. Malone. Helping? You're delaying the entire service. Look around. He discreetly pointed toward the other tables. People are waiting. Emma lowered her head and went back to work, her heart heavy. She tried to move faster, but she couldn't just ignore Arthur. When he finished his meal and she brought the check, the old man fumbled through his pockets, searching for his wallet. "Let me help you, sir," Emma said gently, holding the wallet while he counted the bills with trembling hands. It took a few minutes. Arthur counted slowly, confused, starting over again and again. Emma waited patiently, but she could feel Eric's burning gaze on her back. And then, it happened. Eric crossed the dining room with heavy steps. This time, there were no smiles. He grabbed Emma by the arm firmly and pulled her toward the corner of the room near the kitchen entrance. His voice was low, but the restaurant had grown so quiet that everyone could hear. "Enough, Emma. Enough." The words came out like a sentence. "You're fired. Get your things and go. Now." Somewhere, a fork clattered against a plate. The murmurs died. Emma felt the ground vanish beneath her feet. "Mr. Malone, I was only—" "I don't want to hear it." He raised his hand, cutting her off. "You were warned. Twice. This isn't charity. Leave." Emma felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She removed her apron with trembling hands and handed it to him. Her voice was weak but steady. "I understand." As she walked toward the exit, everyone watched. Some with pity, others with relief that it wasn't them. But one pair of eyes followed her differently. Arthur Morgan sat still, his wrinkled hands resting on the table. His face showed no surprise, only something deeper. A silent understanding. A recognition. As if that scene were merely the first act of a much greater story. Emma stepped through the door and disappeared into the gray afternoon. The restaurant returned to its mechanical rhythm. But Arthur remained seated, thoughtful. His fingers tapped the table. A faint smile appeared on his lips, not of joy, but of decision. Eric returned to his post, satisfied. He didn't know he had just made the greatest mistake of his life. Because that elderly man wasn't just another customer. And what was about to happen would change everything. And you? Have you ever faced injustice at work, punished for doing the right thing? Write "justice" in the comments and share your story. Sometimes, kindness echoes back in mysterious ways. The city lights flickered through the rain-soaked windows as Emma walked home that night. Her steps were slow, heavy, the kind that only come after humiliation. Eric's words kept looping in her mind. "We don't need sentimental waitresses here." She could still hear the laughter that followed, quiet but sharp, echoing from the kitchen staff who didn't dare defend her. That restaurant wasn't just her job, it was her refuge. The only place where she felt her kindness mattered. Now it was gone. She sat by the small window of her apartment, the city humming below, and whispered to herself, "Maybe I care too much." The next morning, she printed resumes and spent hours walking from cafe to cafe. Some managers smiled politely, others barely looked at her. By the third day, her shoes were soaked and her voice was tired from asking for chances that never came. Still, she forced a smile each time, because that's what Emma did. When she finally reached her door that evening, something was there. A plain white envelope, no name, no address. She frowned, looking around the dim hallway. No one. Inside, there was a small folded card, written in elegant black ink. "For the kindness you showed a stranger, thank you, Arthur." Her heart skipped a beat. Arthur. The old man from the restaurant. The one she had helped. Attached to the note was a check, neatly folded in half. She hesitated to open it, but curiosity won. The amount made her blink twice. Enough to cover 2 months of rent. Her first thought was disbelief. Her second was guilt. "Why would he do this?" she whispered. "I was just doing my job." She sat down, staring at the neat signature at the bottom of the check. The issuing company's name read, Hayes Foundation. She had never heard of it. The name tickled something in her memory, the way Arthur had spoken, calm and articulate, not like a lost old man. There had been weight in his tone, a kind of quiet authority. She reached for her phone and searched online. The results loaded quickly. Hayes Foundation, founded by Arthur W. Hayes, a non-profit organization that funded education, shelters, and humanitarian projects across the country. But what caught her attention was the tagline on the website, dedicated to restoring human dignity through small acts of kindness. Emma froze. The phrase hit her like a whisper from the past. Was it the same author? She clicked through pages of photos, award ceremonies, charity events, newspaper articles, and there he was. Arthur W. Hayes, standing tall in a black suit, smiling beside governors and mayors. Same gentle eyes. Same calm expression. The man who couldn't read the menu that night had once owned entire chains of restaurants. Emma leaned back in her chair, stunned. A strange feeling began to rise inside her, confusion, awe, and a subtle hint of fear. Why had he gone to that restaurant? Why her? She read one line from an old interview that made her pause. True character is revealed when no one is watching. Her mind replayed that night, how he had studied her, quietly observing her every move, the way he'd smiled when she brought him water without being asked. Had he been testing her? A chill ran down her spine. She shut the laptop and walked to the window. Outside, the rain had stopped, and the city was wrapped in fog. Down on the street, a black sedan was parked across from her building, engine off. It had been there the night before, too. Her breath caught. Coincidence, she told herself. But the headlights flickered once, and then went dark again. She pulled the curtain closed. Sitting on the couch, she stared at the envelope again. There was something else about it, the faint scent of coffee, and when she lifted the check, she noticed it. A small brown ring, like a coffee stain, on the bottom corner. Her memory snapped back instantly. The same stain that had marked the menu Arthur held that night. Her heartbeat quickened. It couldn't be chance. This wasn't charity. This was deliberate. She turned the envelope over and saw one last thing written in small, neat handwriting. Keep believing, Emma. The world still needs people like you. She hadn't told him her name. He had read it from her name tag at the restaurant, sure, but something about that line felt more personal. More like he had been watching her path ever since that night. For a moment, the silence of the apartment grew too deep. The ticking clock, the muted traffic outside, it all faded. It felt as though Arthur was still there, somewhere in the city, watching to see what she would do next. Emma folded the check, slid it back into the envelope, and placed it on the table. Then she took a slow breath and said out loud, "If this is a test, I'll pass it my way." She didn't cash the check. Not yet. Instead, she pinned the note to her refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a heart, the only decoration in her small kitchen. The next morning, she woke up earlier than usual. Something inside her had shifted. The weight of humiliation was still there, but beneath it was a quiet spark, curiosity, maybe even destiny. She printed more resumes. But this time, when she walked through the city, she looked differently at people. At the man sleeping on a bench, at the woman arguing with a taxi driver, at the teenager giving his umbrella to an old lady at the crosswalk. The world suddenly seemed alive with invisible connections. She didn't know where Arthur was, or why he had reached out to her. But she knew one thing for sure. That message wasn't about money. It was a sign. A silent knock on a door she hadn't realized was there. And somewhere in the foggy skyline, behind those endless windows and streetlights, she felt as if Arthur, or maybe fate itself, had just opened it. The truth begins to unfold. The invitation arrived 5 days later. A single white envelope slipped under her door, no name, no logo. Inside, a cream-colored card embossed in gold. Dinner invitation, golden plate private event. Saturday, 7 p.m. Dress formally. AWH. Emma froze. AWH. Arthur W. Hayes. The initials from the Foundation's website. Her pulse quickened. She hadn't heard from him since the note and the check. Why now? And why there, the restaurant that had humiliated her? That Saturday evening, the city glowed in gold and amber. Emma walked toward the golden plate with trembling hands. The restaurant looked different tonight. Its glass doors shimmered under soft lights, and a red carpet stretched toward the entrance. Through the window, she could see waiters dressed in immaculate uniforms, moving in silence. Everything looked staged. Inside, the familiar scent of roasted herbs and candles greeted her, bittersweet nostalgia wrapped in luxury. A hostess stopped her with a polite smile. "Good evening, Miss Carter. Please, this way." Emma followed her through the hall until they reached the main dining room. The tables were set for only a few guests. And there, standing near the bar with a glass of wine, was Eric. He turned, surprised, and slightly embarrassed. "Emma, what are you doing here?" "I got an invitation," she said quietly. He frowned. "So did I. I thought it was some kind of rehiring dinner. Maybe management wants to bring me back." He gave a nervous laugh. "Guess they realized what a mistake it was to let me go." Emma didn't answer. Her stomach churned. The air in the room felt heavy, almost theatrical. Moments later, the lights dimmed. The chatter faded to silence. And then, the side door opened. A tall man entered, walking slowly, confidently, his silver hair catching the glow of the chandeliers. Emma's breath caught in her throat. It was Arthur. But not the confused old man she had met weeks before. He was dressed in a dark tailored suit, posture straight, eyes calm and commanding. The room seemed to shift around him. Eric's face drained of color. "Wait, is that—" Arthur approached, his expression unreadable. He stopped a few feet from them and smiled faintly. "Good evening, everyone," he began. His voice carried quiet authority. "Some of you know me as Mr. Hayes. Others may remember me simply as Arthur, the old man who couldn't decide what to order." A murmur rippled through the room. Eric stiffened. Emma stayed silent, her heart pounding. Arthur continued. "That night was a test. Not of service, but of character. I visited several of my own establishments, posing as a guest who might be inconvenient, impatient, confused. What I found was telling." He paused, glancing toward Emma. Her eyes met his, and for a brief second she felt seen, completely. "One of you," Arthur said softly, "chose kindness over convenience, patience over pride." He turned to Eric. "And one of you chose control over compassion." The silence was suffocating. Eric tried to force a smile. "Mr. Hayes, sir, if I had known who you were—" Arthur raised a hand, cutting him off. "That's the point, Eric. You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with dignity." The words hit like thunder. Emma lowered her eyes, trying to hold back tears. Arthur walked slowly between them, hands clasped behind his back. "Emma, I saw the way you treated a stranger as though he mattered. You spoke softly, without impatience. You made a man who had everything remember what it feels like to be cared for." He turned toward Eric. "And you, Eric, you made a man who owns this restaurant feel small, invisible, replaceable." The crowd of staff and invitees stood frozen, waiters, chefs, even the hostess, all listening in stunned silence. Arthur's gaze softened again as he faced Emma. "I've spent years building restaurants that look beautiful but forgot how to feel beautiful. You reminded me why I started this business, not to serve meals, but to serve people." He pulled a small leather folder from his pocket and placed it on the table in front of her. "Inside is a proposal," he said. "A new concept, a restaurant that values kindness as much as excellence. I want you to help me build it, to run it." Emma blinked, speechless. "Me? You?" Eric's jaw tightened. "You can't be serious, sir. She's just a—" "Enough," Arthur interrupted. His voice, though quiet, carried steel. If you wish to remain in this company, Eric, you'll do so under her guidance. You'll learn what true leadership looks like, through humility." Eric stood frozen, shame spreading across his face. For the first time, his confidence faltered. Arthur turned back to Emma and smiled gently. "This isn't punishment, Emma. It's restoration. What you gave that night wasn't service, it was grace. The kind this world is starving for." A soft round of applause began at the back of the room, hesitant at first, then growing louder. The sound filled the air with warmth and release. Emma felt tears roll down her cheeks. Arthur stepped closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "Never doubt the power of small kindness, Emma. It changes everything, even when no one's watching." Later that night, as the event ended and the guests dispersed, Emma lingered by the window. The city shimmered outside, lights dancing on wet pavement. She could see her reflection in the glass, the same woman, yet somehow different. Eric approached quietly. He didn't meet her eyes. "I guess I owe you an apology," he muttered. "I thought kindness was weakness. Turns out it's the only thing that lasts." Emma gave a small smile. "We all learn in different ways." Arthur walked up behind them, placing a hand on each of their shoulders. "This," he said softly, "is where it begins, not an ending, but a start. Let's build something that reminds people who they are." He turned toward the exit, leaving them in the golden glow of the chandelier. The restaurant, once a place of humiliation, had become the birthplace of something new. Emma looked around one last time, the air still humming with applause and redemption. And for the first time in weeks she smiled, not out of habit, but from the quiet certainty that her kindness had finally come full circle. Arthur's final lesson wasn't about business, it was about letting go. The silver hearth stood silent under the soft morning light. Sunbeams filtered through the tall windows, falling over polished tables and chairs still wrapped in the scent of fresh varnish. The walls, painted in warm gray tones, echoed softly with each step Emma took. The restaurant was almost ready. After months of dust, planning, and late nights, it finally felt alive. The smell of roasted coffee filled the air as the espresso machine hummed for the very first time. Emma smiled as she walked through the hallway, her hand brushing gently over the new counters. Arthur followed her slowly, cane in hand, his familiar calm presence grounding the room. He looked around with a quiet pride, but his eyes, those wise, kind eyes, seemed dimmer than before. "You did it," Emma said, turning to him with a soft grin. "You brought this place back to life." Arthur chuckled. "We did it, my dear. You gave it a soul." She laughed lightly, shaking her head. "You and your poetic lines again." But beneath her smile, there was a quiet unease. She had noticed it, the pauses in his steps, the moments he caught his breath, the way his hand sometimes trembled slightly as he poured his tea. He always brushed it off. "I'm fine, my dear," he'd say. "Just old bones getting older." Yet Emma wasn't convinced. There was something in the way he spoke lately, as if he were trying to finish a chapter before the ink ran dry. That evening, they stayed late, placing the last touches before opening day. The final details, a centerpiece here, a folded napkin there, were like strokes on a painting. At one point, Arthur stopped by the large mirror hanging on the wall. The golden frame reflected the warm lights and the two of them standing side by side. He stared at his own reflection in silence. "You know, Emma," he said after a long pause, "every place has a soul. But it only lives when the people inside it believe." She smiled, thinking it was just another one of his poetic sayings. But this time, his voice carried something else, a stillness, almost like a farewell disguised as wisdom. The next morning, the clock struck 9. Then 10. Then noon. Arthur hadn't come. Emma checked her phone. No messages. No missed calls. She dialed his number, her hand trembling slightly. It went straight to voicemail. "Arthur, it's me. Just making sure you're all right. Call me when you can, okay?" An hour passed. Then another. The quiet of the new restaurant suddenly felt heavier. Finally, she called his driver. "Yes, Miss Emma," the man said softly. "Mr. Arthur told me he'd be taking a day to rest. He didn't say more." Rest. The word felt wrong. Arthur never rested when there was work to be done. Something in her chest tightened. Late that afternoon, as the sky turned amber, Emma returned to the restaurant. The lights were off, the silence thick. She walked toward the counter to grab her notebook, and then she saw it. A single envelope, lying neatly on the polished surface. Her name written across the front in Arthur's handwriting, graceful, deliberate, unmistakable. Her breath caught. She tore it open carefully, her eyes already brimming. "If you're reading this, it means I had to leave sooner than I planned. Don't worry, this isn't goodbye. I just didn't want my absence to slow your steps. This place was never about me. It was about what you represent, what kindness looks like when it leads. Lead with heart, not with fear. That's the only recipe that never fails." Her hands trembled as she turned the page. Inside was a second sheet, official documents, signed and sealed. Property transfer papers. The silver hearth was now hers. At the very bottom, one final line, written in his familiar, careful script. "I built walls. You built doors. Keep them open." For a long time, Emma stood there in silence. The hum of the city outside felt distant, muffled by the storm of emotions inside her chest. Tears rolled down her cheeks, not of sorrow alone, but of understanding. Arthur hadn't disappeared without reason. He knew. He had been preparing her all along, not just to manage a restaurant, but to lead with compassion, to trust her own light. He had left her not with money, not with fame, but with something far greater, belief. Belief in herself. Belief in others. Belief that kindness could still change things. That night, as the clock struck 7, the first official evening of the Silver Hearth began. Emma arrived early, holding the letter close to her chest before locking it safely in the office drawer. She walked through the restaurant slowly, turning on each light one by one. Warm golden tones filled the room, bouncing softly off the polished wood. The tables stood ready, each one set with care, each candle waiting to be lit. She took a deep breath, then walked to the entrance. For a moment, she looked up at the new sign above the door, the Silver Hearth, shining faintly under the night sky. Her reflection stared back at her in the glass. Behind her, the restaurant glowed with life, the soul Arthur had spoken of. She whispered softly, almost like a prayer. "For you, Arthur." Then she pushed the doors open. The sound of footsteps, laughter, and music began to fill the air, the heartbeat of something new. And as the first customers stepped inside, the light seemed to grow warmer, as if the place itself had taken a breath. Arthur might have been gone, but his presence lingered in every corner, in the smell of coffee, in the sound of the clinking cups, in the way Emma smiled as she greeted each guest. The legacy he left behind wasn't a restaurant. It was faith, the courage to lead with kindness, even when the world wasn't kind back. Because sometimes, the greatest inheritance isn't what's written in ink. It's what's written in the hearts we leave behind. The true legacy of a mentor isn't what he builds, but what he awakens in others. The rain fell softly against the windows of the Silver Hearth, tracing silver trails down the glass like tiny rivers of memory. Outside, the city glowed beneath streetlights and umbrellas. Inside, the restaurant was alive. Laughter, clinking glasses, the faint aroma of roasted coffee and fresh bread weaving through the air. Years had passed since the day Arthur's letter was found. Yet somehow his presence still lingered, in the way the candles flickered at each table, in the warmth that greeted everyone who walked through the doors. The Silver Hearth had become more than a restaurant. It was a refuge, a place where strangers felt like family, and every meal told a story of second chances. Emma stood by the counter, now older, her hair tied neatly in a bun streaked with threads of silver. The lines on her face weren't of weariness but of wisdom, etched by laughter, struggle, and grace. She watched her staff moving around the room with a sense of quiet pride. Most of them were young, kids who had come from difficult beginnings, who had been told no too many times in life. But Emma had learned from Arthur that talent isn't always visible at first glance. Sometimes it's hidden beneath fear. Sometimes all it needs is a little faith to surface. And so she gave them what Arthur once gave her, a chance. Each day at the Silver Hearth began with the same ritual. Before opening the doors, Emma would gather her team near the front counter, where Arthur's old photo hung on the wall. His gentle smile seemed to bless the place. Beneath the frame, engraved in brass, was his favorite phrase: "Serve with your heart, not your ego." "Remember," Emma would say, looking at the group, "people don't come here just to eat. They come to feel seen, to feel welcome. That's what makes us different." The young servers would nod, some smiling shyly, others with eyes full of purpose. And as the lights turned on, warmth would flood the room again, the kind of warmth that only kindness can create. That night, the rain fell harder, tapping on the windows like soft percussion. The city outside blurred into shades of gold and gray. The restaurant was nearly full, couples sharing desserts, families laughing over steaming plates, soft jazz floating through the air. Emma stood near the back, watching. She loved these moments, when the world outside seemed cold and hurried, yet inside her restaurant, time slowed down. Then, she noticed something near the front table. A young waitress, Clara, barely 20, stood beside an elderly man who looked confused by the menu. His hands shook slightly as he tried to read the small print. Clara knelt beside him, speaking softly, pointing out dishes, helping him decide. She smiled patiently, listening, nodding as he told a story that likely had nothing to do with food. And still, she stayed, present, kind, unhurried. Emma felt a quiet stir in her heart. She had seen this before. Years ago, in another restaurant, another young woman had done the same, taking too long to help an old man, getting scolded for it, then fired. That woman was her. And that moment had changed her life. Now, standing there, watching Clara, she understood something profound. The circle had completed itself. Arthur's lesson had lived on, not through bricks or recipes, but through actions. Through the invisible ripple of kindness that moves from one soul to another. When the rush of dinner service eased, Emma approached Clara gently. "You handled that guest beautifully," she said. Clara blushed. "Oh, thank you. I was worried I was taking too long." Emma smiled, her eyes soft. "If it's time spent with kindness, it's never too long." The girl smiled back, not yet realizing the weight of those words. But someday she would. Later that evening, after the last guest had left and the staff had gone home, Emma walked through the empty restaurant. The rain had stopped. The streetlights shimmered on the wet pavement outside. She turned off the lights one by one, leaving only the warm glow above the old photo on the wall. Arthur's photo. She stood there for a moment, staring at it, her reflection faintly visible in the glass beside his. "Look at this place, Arthur," she whispered. "It's everything you dreamed of, and more." She paused, her voice trembling with emotion. "They keep your words alive every day. Serve with your heart, not your ego. You'd be proud of them. Of us." Her gaze softened as she smiled through quiet tears. "You taught me that success isn't about being remembered, it's about what continues because of you." She placed her hand over the frame, as if to bridge the years that separated them. For a brief moment, she imagined him standing there beside her, cane in hand, that familiar sparkle in his eyes. "Keep them open," he'd once written. And she had. The next morning, sunlight spilled into the restaurant like a quiet blessing. Emma unlocked the doors and stepped outside, breathing in the crisp air. The city was waking up, and so was the Silver Hearth. Across the street, she saw Clara helping a passerby pick up a fallen bag of groceries. No cameras, no applause, just instinctive kindness. Emma smiled to herself. The world was still learning, still changing. All because one man, long ago, had chosen to believe that compassion was stronger than pride. That night, the lights of the Silver Hearth glowed once more, reflecting softly on the rain-kissed glass. Inside, laughter echoed again. New faces, new stories, same warmth. And somewhere, in the hush between the sounds, Arthur's words seemed to whisper through the air. He gave her a job. She gave the world a lesson that kindness never goes unnoticed. Emma looked around the room, her eyes glistening, and felt a peace she hadn't known in years. The circle was complete. Arthur's legacy lived on, not in his name, but in the lives that had been touched by his belief in people. And perhaps that was always the point. Because long after the last meal is served, and the last light fades, kindness remains.